Good morning, everyone. Thanks for listening to our panel discussion and jumping over to our Q&A session. I'd love to welcome back Nadjib, Olivia, and Anna, my esteemed panelists. And we're just going to get started in a minute or so with the Q&A session. And I think we already have some questions lined up and some people would love to jump on stage with us and ask away. So looks like we've got a question from Gary Cohen. Gary, I'm gonna bring you up on stage with us so you can join the conversation.
I apologize. I did not know how this works, so I really don't have a question yet, but I'm sure I will as we get into it.
Well, Gary, you're on the spot now, so you can ask us anything. Favorite food, whatever it is. No questions necessary, but if you do have one, you're welcome to ask it now. Otherwise, you can certainly come back on later in the session.
What was your inspiring story to be involved? What was the moment?
The moment to be involved in olfactory
the work
technology.
That we're all doing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Depends how far you want to trace that back. Nadjib, do you want to start there?
Yes, I think I can say that it was being with friends that were in contact with Greenpeace and very active in these activities and exploring how we can use different kinds of storytelling to tell different stories was my starting point, and that got me hooked actually. So I normally create for consumer products, but actually being able to create for something that is bigger than us, like a message of environmental recovery application like this. Being able to use perfume for that is a privilege for me, and I will use it even more in the future because it is inspiring to do it for yourself.
Thanks.
Anna, what was your inspiration initially?
Yeah, so I come from, psychology. I've been interested in education for a long time. And when I had the first VR experience, the first thought was, wow, this is going to hit education hard because it's so intense. And then back then I was just completing my master's. So I decided to focus my PhD on using VR, especially how VR can impact, learning, behavior. And since then, it has been a very interesting journey because the content has been evolving so fast, technology has been evolving so fast, and being able to, involve other senses just than sight has been very promising. So, yeah.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah. Olivia, what's your origin story?
Well, it's a bit difficult to separate everything, but I come from a design background, and that's kind of, I wanted to work in advertising for good. And it became rather difficult to figure out how to do that in that space. And once then I reawakened my sense of smell and my passion for smell. I was like, this is going to be the vehicle to actually touch people and help them see people and the world in a different way. It just exploded in my mind. So really, since I decided to, or discovered that I wanted to work in smell, that's kind of when I saw that this could actually be possible beyond like advertising or visual communication.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. If I trace my origin story back all the way to what got me involved in scent, it's over 20 years ago studying food science for the first time in culinary school, and was doing something wrong. I don't remember what I was doing. And this crazy French chef named Chef Andre, if you're out there listening right now, you're the origin story too. But I was messing with something in a pan, and he came and he smacked it out of my hands and grabbed me and told me how important aroma was. And I was ruining the aroma of the onions. And so then he got into the science of how powerful aroma is, and it became very not a noble cause at first. It was just cooking onions. But as technology came into play and I could see the power over like psychology and emotion and behavior, then it became, what else can we do with this? What else can we do with this? What else can we do with this? And led us to a group like this here talking about how sensory technology can save the planet. So it all started with a crazy French chef and an onion. So,
Thank you.
Gary, thank you very much for jumping on stage. Even though it was unintentional, it was a great question. We appreciate it. We have a question from Sustain Frame. Hi, how are you? Welcome to the stage.
Good, how are you? Thank you.
Excellent.
And ironically, like I saw that this panel was happening and it just like sparked so much joy within me because like I've created a company centered solely around this and a basis of like experience driven. And so I've just been able to like have words now to like be able to tell people what this means. So thank you guys for creating this. But more specifically, I think I had a question for Anna, just in the space of where I'm at. I've been able to create events centered around inspiring action, or more specifically, environmental justice issues or social justice issues, and creating experiences like dinners, workshops, etc. around that. But my tools are only based off of my experience in hospitality and things like that. But I'd like to be able to dive more in a psychological way of the experience and like getting a feedback or things like that where I can utilize.
Yeah, yeah.
Out.
Yeah, now you're back.
Got it. Can you?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. But I'm curious in a way, somebody that doesn't have a doctorate, what would be like the best way of educating myself in the actual like scientific background to these experiences that I'm creating versus like just having the experience and getting the content. And I want to be able to like actually figure out if this is inspiring action, similar to the homeless experience that you had with the VR. Like, how is it best for me to be able to know where to go to next?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for me, the starting point was I was checking for what was out there, like in terms of research, scientific publications. And for example, if you go to our lab's webpage, you're going to find all these publications, and then you can download them, read them, think about them. And then from that one, you can just, snowballing and find another ones that you are interested in. Because when we talk about science, it's very specific. So depending on what kind of experience you want to deliver, you can find a bunch of options, that technology can support you to better deliver this kind of message. So, and I'm happy also, just email me if you have any questions, specific questions. I'm happy to answer you and, give you directions.
Perfect.
If I
That
can
would be
help.
amazing because I was like, I had a long list, but I'm going to try and just go with one question. So that would be amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for jumping on stage with us.
But I think also just a comment is that we often think that we need very big means and that we need a lot of technology and that we need a lot of data points to record this. I think very often we also forget the subjective experience of people. And sometimes when you see someone smiling too much or too much, is there ever smiling too much? Someone smiling, someone crying, someone having strong emotions, and then asking them directly, you can also see the effect that you can have on one person. And sometimes that's almost as important as the effect you can have a mild effect on 1,000. You can have a very powerful effect on one with your experience, use it. And maybe it's as easy as cooking something nice. The right flavor of onion might change something in someone's perception. And it's important not to forget that, mainly when we want to create empathetic experiences with other people. Like, what do they eat in Afghanistan right now? What do they eat in Mexico? What do they eat in any place? And just that experience can be a thought provoker to have other ideas and other conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question from the audience is from Dr. Andrew Clayton. Dr. Clayton, how's it going? Thanks for jumping in. And his question is, how has sensory experiences, specifically olfactory VR, helped or connected to the development of resilience within people? That's a really good question. So I think there's kind of two parts to that from my end, is that resilience is built from experience. And you don't get resilience really from reading a book or necessarily having a conversation, but you get resilience from an experience. Dr. Clayton, it looks like you are volunteering to come on stage with us too, so I'm gonna bring you up.
Awesome.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Wasn't sure if I was doing it right. So
you're doing it right. There's no wrong way to do it. You're crushing it.
Awesome.
So I think resilience is built from experience, and that those experiences can be very small experiences, like having a difficult conversation with someone, or they can be really, really intense experiences, like experiencing combat or trauma in an ER. And so what VR does, and even more so sensory VR, is allow you to have a very immersive, realistic experience. So your brain and your body don't necessarily know the difference between the VR experience and a real experience. So you're able to develop both muscle memory for certain skills, but also kind of emotional resilience by exposing yourselves to these situations in a safe, controlled environment. So we have at OVR, we have a little bit of experience, working with you and working with other folks in the military, like combat medics, and running through these experiences. And one of the in combat, or as a firefighter, or as a police officer, one of the most dangerous things is when you're presented with too much new sensory input that you don't know how to process it, and you freeze, versus fight or flight. And that's when people get injured, that's when people could potentially die, and that's where a lot of the trauma takes place. So what can we do to get people both kind of primed for high risk, high traumatic situations, and also give them the tool set they need to react. So that's my position on building resilience. But love to hear from the rest of the panelists also, because I think you probably have some very different experience and a different point of view on resilience. Olivia, do you want to kick it off for us? I think you're still on mute.
Hey, so yeah, I think you really nailed it, Aaron. It's being exposed. You're being exposed to it in a repeated fashion, in a safe environment. Our sense of smell is able to absorb and understand exactly what's happening. And I think that's really the way to go in terms of creating this sense of resilience, so that when you are in the situation, you will be able to conquer it in a better way, in a stronger, more confident way, right? It's about experiencing and having these experiences before. That's really what it is in normal life. And I think that's what it also is, the role.
And it doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. The same mechanism that creates emotional resilience for negative situations can create positive associations. And Nadjib, you can probably speak to that quite a bit too, is the kind of creating experiences that have to do with positive associations and emotions, and not just negative ones.
Yes, the positive ones. I think in my personal experience, there is no particular research on this from my end at least, but from a subjective point of view, I think that by having the correct sensory stimuli, you can actually enhance what you're seeing or listening to. And therefore, for me, that would be how the olfactive part in the VR would help, by helping the message that is a message created to build resilience, to help that message come to the brain in a more coherent way, thanks to the smell.
And stronger way, more emotional.
Mm-hmm. More
I think stronger is often what happens, and then the real difficulty is to make it right. But at least stronger, yes, you're right.
And Anna, I think a lot of your research is in both of these categories and everywhere in between.
Yeah, I think, Aaron, you just explained it exactly how it works. And I think when we use VR, a good point of it is that you can customize the experiences. So we know that building resilience is something very personal. So some situations that are hard for me maybe not be hard for Aaron, and so on. So as a clinician, like a psychotherapy, it's hard to, expose each patient to these different situations in real life. And you can do that in VR more easily. And even you can stop the situation, like the exposure, when you think it's, the positive association maybe is being turned to a negative association. Like, because when we are talking about resilience, you're talking about new behaviors that needs to emerge. And so you're exposing the patient or the participant to a new situation that you expect them to have good outcome from that. But sometimes things change and, maybe it can trigger something. And in VR, you can just turn off the experience and that's it. But when you are in real life, for example, if you have someone that has fear to fly, they can start to trigger the emotions in the middle of the flight, and you can't take the patient from there that easily. So VR helps that very well. And one thing that, for example, that was preventing using senses like smells in VR in the past was that you couldn't shut off this, stimuli like this. Like you had the scent all over the room for a while and you couldn't stop it. And now you can do it. So you can also have this control over what kind of smell and scents people are being exposed and stop it immediately if you think that from that on, it won't help anymore. So those are great things. In the lab, we have the experience about empathy that was run by Fernanda Herrera that we mentioned in the video that you just watched. And it's showed, and several other experiences in VR, they have been showing that when you compare VR to other kind of media, for example, computers, it has been more effective in developing social skills, empathy. So it, especially because of that, because your brain thinks that you are there when you are in VR. So the body physiological responses are very close to what it would be in a real life.
One of the things that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Clayton. Jump in.
I just wanted to say, yeah, thank you for all those comments, because we here at Area University look at a lot of those things. You talked about exposure therapy and virtual reality exposure therapy for veterans and PTSD, and we're even testing some of the smell stuff now through with Aaron's OVR company and stuff. And I think I actually have one of the that's actually right behind me, getting ready to go to class with it actually in about an hour to talk to our students about their first research project, which is using sensory experiences and olfactory VR smell as one of our first studies. And looking at that, and even now taking other VR simulations that the Air Force has developed. For example, had a suicide awareness training in VR, where an airman talks to an airman in the VR headset to help talk them down and walk through that process. And if you're in the VR headset, you can tell like the individual is obviously distressed, has a shirt on, looks like hasn't taken a shower in weeks. The room looks like a mess, like there's beer cans everywhere. And then students start thinking, what if you could smell in that VR what it smells like to be in that room, in that house, right? And you start adding this exposure of other sensories into the VR world, other than haptics and sight and sounds that we have in VR, but now bringing in the smell and adding that muscle memory through the use of smell. We just think it's amazing, and we're starting to catch up, if you will, here at Area University on this concept of olfactory VR, smell, and sensory experiences through VR stuff. So this has been fascinating.
Well,
that's amazing. Which university are you at?
So I work at Area University at Maxwell Air Force Base. So it's the university for officer education. Students come here for all kinds of courses. The two big ones are master's courses for lieutenant colonels and majors in the Air Force, and then they have to pick electives. And a lot of students pick my elective, which is the use of immersive technology across the spectrum of the Air Force. And so we look at all kinds of things. And so in this year, our focus is going to be on olfactory VR, and sensory experiences is one of our big studies that we're going to kind of focus on this year.
That's very interesting, because also just keep in mind that you can also use the sense of smell to stimulate different, to make them more relaxed or more alert. So these are also other aspects unrelated from simulating an environment that you can use sense of smell for.
Absolutely. And so one of our headsets that we're going to be using testing is to a decompression protocol stress relaxation, mindfulness through an Inhale OVR VR headset that provides that opportunity to bring in mindfulness, but also provides the olfactory experience as well. And so that's one of our other things we're at. But our students now are looking outside the box. How else can we bring in sensory into the VR world? Specifically, since the Air Force does a lot with VR training on our technical side for pilot training and maintenance training. All of our technical career fields are using VR. We've exploded just like the industry has over the last 5 or so years. But and they do that to create muscle memory, right? So students know how to fly a plane. But if you bring in other sensory, such as smell, and you're in that plane, that cockpit, or you're out there shooting that fire weapon, and every time you smell gunpowder, or you smell what the cockpit smells like, or you smell the engine oil burning, you have this muscle memory for sensory experiences, not just the VR itself that's providing the technical muscle memory, if you will.
Right. Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you.
Like Olivia, I'm gonna preach for perfume as well, and I had a Dr. Barry Smith in London that had this theory that people that became senile also lost their appetite, and he had this theory that I don't know if he proved or not, that actually the loss of smell also comes with the loss of taste for life, the loss of appetite, the loss of appetite to eat healthy food, and to become senile, because it has connections to memory. And therefore, like Olivia said also, it's important to understand just the basics of scent, so then you're going to be able to use them even more powerfully combined with VR.
Yeah, this has opened up a whole new research section for our students on sensory and specifically smell, one of the strongest senses we have, right, when it comes to memory and recollection, storytelling, narrative psychology, all the things that kind of play into this. It's huge.
If I can jump in, it's so interesting, this discussion, because I'm thinking about, using scents and smells also on training. So for anchoring some sort of, memories and skills that you're developing in a simulation, and then you want to trigger that in the, real environment that you need that. So we don't have any research on that, but it would be very interesting to learn more about it.
Absolutely.
I think that there is an old research on that on a classroom, one that had a very simple smell and what that didn't. And I think I don't have the reference and I haven't read that article particularly, but I remember hearing about this study where actually children remembered better just with a random smell. Just the fact of having a smell in the room helped them remember better. So this would be a great area of research as well.
But the most studies are actually on rosemary. So if we look at like cognitive performance, math tests, problem solving, it's all rosemary oil or a specific component in rosemary. I'm not a chemist. That is actually the one that is helpful for memory, secondary, and there's different states of memory, the memory processing, as well as problem solving, not acquisition of skills specifically. So rosemary is an interesting one where there is published research for you to look into, if that's something that you might be interested in.
That was awesome. Thank you for that info. We're gonna have to do some more research here in just a little bit. But that's how the Air Force, for most of our students, they fly in a VR simulator now. So they're not in the cockpit. They're less in the cockpit than they are in the and more in the VR simulator now. So do you actually lose a little bit by going into the VR world? And that's something we talk about in the Air Force is flow theory, right? When do you go in and out of VR in training, right? And so Chmielewski talks about, and I pronounce the name right, I think it's Chmielewski, talks about flow theory. When do you go in and out of VR? At what stage? And at what level are you trying to create the drive, the motivation, if you will, or the anticipation of the student being in VR, and then what skill level do you need in the VR? And that's what we're kind of got in the Air Force. Are we doing too much in VR with things? But if we bring in other sensories into it, then maybe that changes the flow theory or the flow of going in and out of the VR.
Very interesting.
Thanks again, Dr. Clayton. I know that we're about a minute away from ending the session, so I want to check in with everyone to see if anyone has any final wisdom, parting words of wisdom, or any thoughts on the panel side that you want to share with us. But before I do, I just want to say again how exciting the conversation was, how excited I am to be on a panel with the three of you and everyone in the audience, to be talking about the kind of the inherent value of scent and also how it affects virtual reality experiences and everything from PTSD for combat veterans to empathy and consumer behavior for social and climate justice. And we spanned a lot. And I think we could keep going for years and years. And I hope people join us in the conversation offline after the session ends too. Any parting words, Anna?
Yes, I believe on the potential that we have, shaping behaviors and being better on what we want to using VR, especially now that we are learning how to, work from home, we are being apart, so how we can still keep working on some sort of skills that we would require to be together. So when we talk about soft skills, for example, VR has been shown to be very effective. And when we talk about involving other senses, I think it's a whole new road that's being opened now. I can compare that when the first VR headsets were developed on the 60s, that we had all these, simulation of the sight of what we are seeing, and now we can simulate what we are, smelling, and we can change it so that's what I'm most excited about, that this possibility to change the sense and control it without having any remains in the room. So I believe we are going to see a lot of good research coming on, and we are going to learn even more how we can, shape and change our behavior using other senses than just, auditory and visual.
What I would love to see is like also using VR and sensory technology to help people visualize like positive future worlds, but also their own life, like kind of using this as a tool to reach their goals. I think that would be like really incredible, because that's really the power of smell, has this way and has this ability to help support us and help us create these visions basically and set us in the right path. So I would really love to see VR using that to help like not just groups, but also single people, help them reach their goals, even if it's not like, feeling good in a military situation, but if it's just like something like, my next 10 years, how do I want it to look like? Let's shape it. Let's shape the smells, the senses. What is it really going to be? And help them get there. I think that would be really powerful.
Absolutely.
I guess my final word is that actually extinction also happens in smells, and there are some smells that you might not smell anymore in the future from your past or from your present. So build up that muscle memory that Dr. Andrew was talking about, and actually try to remember all the smells you love, because they might be there.
Well, thanks again, everyone. And thanks to our audience. And we'll leave it at there. Have a great afternoon.